Jesus was done in the desert and he was tempted by Satan and he overcame that, Jesus began his ministry. He began teaching and preaching. Now, as you know, Jesus had people who traveled with him and they were called his disciples. These were people that he chose to teach. So Jesus was a Jewish man, and so he would be called a rabbi, which means teacher. And these are some stories of when Jesus called his disciples to come and follow him. Jesus left the desert and began teaching people about God. He went from town to town, and everyone who heard him thought well of him. Then Jesus went back to Nazareth, his own hometown where he grew up. He spoke in the synagogue. That's a fancy word for their like a tent kind of church building where people came to pray. The people were amazed by his words. "How can this be Joseph's son?" they asked. Many people became angry when Jesus said he was God's son. They drove him out of town. They even wanted to kill him. But God kept Jesus safe and helped him get away. Think about that. The town where Jesus grew up in was Nazareth. And these people knew Jesus when he was a little child and a teenager. They were probably wondering, how can this boy who we know claim to be God's son, the Messiah who we're waiting for? It's just really hard for them to believe that. Pretty sad. One day, Jesus walked by and saw John the Baptist talking with two of his followers. John had baptized Jesus the day before, so he said, "This is God's son." He didn't mind when the men left to follow Jesus. That evening, one of the men, Andrew, ran to find his brother Simon. "Come, meet the Savior," Andrew said. Jesus gave Simon a new name. Peter was his new name, and that means rock. Jesus knew someday Peter would be strong, like a rock. Jesus taught many people by the Sea of Galilee. One day, Jesus got into Peter's boat, and Peter pushed the boat into the water so the people by the side of the lake could hear Jesus. When he was done talking, Jesus told Peter to throw his nets into the water. "We fished all night and we didn't catch a thing," Peter said. Now think about that. These fishermen, the only way they can get money is to catch fish and sell the fish to get money. So Peter had been fishing all night long and didn't catch anything. I can imagine Peter would be very nervous about not having enough money to buy food for his family. And in the Bible, it actually talks about Peter being married. So I'm assuming Peter had a wife and maybe he had children. So anyways, he's stressed out. He's been trying to fish all night. He hasn't caught anything. And Jesus said, "Throw your nets into the water." "We fished all night and didn't catch a thing," Peter said. But he did what Jesus asked. He was obedient. When the nets filled up with fish, they were so full they began to break. Peter fell down on his knees. He was completely amazed. "Don't be afraid," Jesus said. "From now on, you will be fishing for people." You will be fishing for people. Boys and girls, have you heard that expression, being a fisher of men? Peter fished for fish, but being a fisher of people, let's think about what that means. It probably means that you can tell anybody about Jesus. Just like when you cast a great big net off of a boat, all kinds of fish can swim into that net. It's like anybody can come to Jesus, and it's our job to tell them. We can be a disciple, just like Jesus' disciples were. Jesus was walking along the lake shore when he saw two brothers, James and John, who were also fishermen. They were throwing their nets into the water. So Jesus called out to them, "Follow me and you'll catch some great big fish." Jesus wasn't talking about catching fish in the lake. He was talking about finding people who needed to know God. The two men dropped their nets and followed Jesus, just like Andrew and Simon Peter did. These men were called disciples. Jesus chose 12 disciples to learn from him as he did God's work. I want you to think, boys and girls, could you be a disciple? How could you be a disciple? Or maybe you have already been a disciple and will continue to do that. Have you ever told anybody about God? Have you ever told your story about how you know God? Today, in your Jesus Begins His Ministry booklet, I'd like you to turn to the page, this one. Fishers of people. I'd like you to answer these questions. It says, read the following statements. If a statement is true, color the fish green. If the statement is false, color the fish red. And write a corrected sentence on the line below. Maybe we could do this together. Number 1, Jesus called some fishermen to be his disciples. Is that true? Yes, I think that's true. Let's color that fish green. Number 2, fishing was often hard work. What do you think? I think that's also true. If Peter worked all night and didn't catch any fish, I'm sure it was very hard work. Number 3, the fishermen caught many fish without Jesus' help that day. I agree with you. I think the answer is false. We're going to color that fish red because that's false. And what would a correct sentence be? I think a correct sentence would be, they needed Jesus' help to catch fish. How about number 4? When the fishermen let down their nets, they caught only a few fish. What do you think? True or false? I think it's false. It says they caught so many fish that the nets broke. I wonder if you can change the sentence and make it be a correct sentence. Number 5, the people whom Jesus called followed him right away. It's true, isn't it? They went right away. I wonder if I would go right away. Number 6, only fishermen can fish for people. Ooh, only fishermen can fish for people. What do you think? Why do you think that? And number 7, we can become Jesus' disciples too. True or false? What do you think? And why do you think that? You can also turn to this coloring page. It says, Jesus said to them, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Then they immediately left their nets and followed him.